Well, hello xenographers everywhere and welcome to another episode. Modern computer designed lenses are technically near perfect and they make technically outstanding images, but they can sometimes be a bit bland and predictable. Vintage lenses, by contrast, have flaws and imperfections that give their images a quirkiness, a character, a visual signature that modern lenses just can't match. Today we're going to look at three vintage lenses from Industar and Pentax. They've all got loads of character, they'll all make unique images, and they are all cheaply available. And here's the first of those lenses, the Pentax Auto-Takumar 55mm f1.8. The build quality on these lenses is exquisite. There's just no other word to describe it. It's all metal, so there's quite a bit of weight to it, and although this one dates to around 1960, the focus ring turns pretty much as smoothly as the day it left the factory. In appearance, it's understated. This isn't a flashy lens by any means, and its M42 screw mount means it's easy to use on digital mirrorless cameras or any of hundreds of M42 film SLRs. That beautiful engineering makes this lens a delight to use, and the images it makes are equally delightful. In fact, I find them quite stunning. It's not the most technically accomplished lens out there. Very few vintage lenses are. It's not the sharpest lens I ever shot with, for example, and although stopping down to f4 makes it sharper, that's not really what this lens is about. For me, it's entirely sharp enough, and I'm much more interested in the overall look and feel of an image, and in that department, this lens delivers. It's no exaggeration to say that images from this lens have a sparkle, a beauty, a magic, a unique visual aesthetic that I haven't seen in any lens outside the immediate Pentax family. What this lens has is an identity. Its treatment of colour is nothing short of delicious. Saturation is strong and colours are rendered boldly, not quite at maximum but not far off. These are striking colours, direct, rich and full, but at the same time, and in my experience this is unique to Pentax lenses, at the same time there's a subtlety and a delicacy with these colours. They're never oversaturated and they never seem too strong. It's a very pleasing, very beautiful look, and I don't know of lenses from any other manufacturer that can reproduce it. In most conditions, contrast is strong and it makes bold and punchy images in both colour and black and white. In fact, I really like its black and white images, and it does seem to be one of those lenses that works particularly well in monochrome, rendering blacks, whites and greys with a particular sensitivity and delicacy. As with most vintage lenses, contrast washes out if you catch a light source at the right angle. Shielding with a hand or a lens hood will prevent it. Background blur is really nice. In fact, mega expensive rarities apart, it's some of the nicest, most consistent, most predictable blur I've seen from any vintage lens. Almost all vintage lenses have an unsweet spot, a point where the relation of camera, subject and background distances produces an unpleasant harshness or nervousness in the blur, and that can detract from a shot. With this lens, although the character of the blur changes as distances change, I couldn't find any point where it actually becomes unpleasant, a rare quality indeed in a vintage lens. I rate this lens, which costs around £30, as a better buy than its big brother, the Pentax 50mm f1.4, which costs around £100. That extra tiny bit of aperture will bring an extra tiny bit of blur, but the 1.4's softer wide open. It has a spot where blur turns harsh, and it's 3 times the price. The 1.8 has good sharpness, great colour, unflappable background blur and outstanding quality of manufacture. Make no mistake, this is one of the best bargains in vintage lenses there is. Our next lens is a rangefinder lens, the Industar 26, one of the cheapest vintage lenses you can buy. It's a simple lens with a Zeiss Tessar layout, an inherently sharp design that makes very sharp images. It's similar in appearance to the Industar 61 but without the painted metal. The 26 is all polished aluminium, so it has a real classic look. These lenses were supplied with the Fed 2 and early Fed 3 rangefinders. This one dates to, I think, about 1965, and it has the purple lens coating that seems to work really well on the early Helios lenses. It's a rangefinder lens, so on a full frame or film camera the minimum focus distance is 1 meter. Apertures run from f2.8 to f22, so it's not a particularly fast lens. There are no click stops on the aperture ring, handy if you're shooting video and you want to change aperture on the fly. The Tessar design gives good sharpness, and this is a very sharp lens. It's not as sharp as the Pentax 50mm f4 macro, my gold standard for sharpness in vintage lenses, but it is slightly sharper than the Pentax 50mm f1.8 on test today. Stopping down to f4 brings only a small increase in sharpness. Stopping down further to f8 though doesn't seem to change things at all. For all practical purposes then, this is a lens you can shoot wide open all day long with no significant penalty in sharpness. This lens is very sensitive to light. It immediately washes out and loses contrast in conditions where almost any other vintage lens I've used would be unaffected. This lens gives up easily, but it's equally easy to cure. Shoot it with a lens hood and the issue goes away. With a hood, this lens will make bold and punchy images in most conditions. So eager is this lens to lose contrast though that I'm going to recommend something I've never recommended before. This lens should always be shot with a hood. With a hood in place, this lens gives very nice colours. They're not as saturated as the Pentax and they seem a little more restrained. Nevertheless, they're full and solid rather than washed out and weak. They have a sort of earthy quality, and the lens seems to favour greens and browns, though other colours are represented nicely too, and I find the overall effect to be very pleasing. With a maximum aperture of f2.8 and a minimum focus distance of 1 meter, this isn't the blurriest lens in the world. There is blur on hand though, especially if you stay close to your subject, and the quality of that blur is really nice. Up close it's very smooth, and unlike wider aperture lenses, there's not so much blur that background forms disappear. Instead, this lens separates the subject from the background, directing the viewer's attention towards it. Blur falls away with distance, of course, but unless you're shooting at very long distances, there's usually enough to provide some separation, and I couldn't find a point where blur becomes harsh or unpleasant. This little lens is sweet all the way. This is one of the cheapest vintage lenses you can buy. They sell for around £10 to £15, sometimes less, and when you consider the quality of the images it can make, this might quite possibly be the best value vintage lens in the world. Finally today we have the tiny and rather delightful Industar 50mm f3.5. This lens was very kindly lent to me by viewer Derek Holmes, so many thanks Derek for the loan. There were 2 versions of this lens, a rangefinder version with an L39 screw mount made for Zorki rangefinders, and a much smaller M42 screw mount version for Zenit SLRs. This is the SLR version, and it must be one of the smallest, if not the smallest, 50mm lenses in the world. Even fully extended, it's not much more than an inch long. This lens is as minimal as it gets. The rangefinder version focuses only to 1 meter, but the SLR version focuses down to a useful 65 centimeters. It's not the fastest lens in the world with its maximum aperture of f3.5, and it's not the best in low light either. If you're shooting on digital though, you can always boost ISO to compensate. Like the Industar 26, the 50 has a Tessar design, so it's a very sharp lens. It's sharper than the Industar 26, it's said to be sharper than the Industar 22, and it might even be a bit sharper than the Industar 61. Whatever the case, even wide open, this is one of the sharpest Tessar lenses from the former USSR. Stopping down doesn't significantly improve things either. At f3.5 it gives near maximum sharpness. I love the colour signature from this lens. There's plenty of saturation, but not too much. It stops just short of the oversaturated look. Colours are resonant but natural, much as they look in life, in fact. I really like the way it renders black and white too. It renders with a delicacy and a smoothness that I haven't seen from any other lens. Tones are clear and distinct without being overpowering. In fact, this is one of my favourite lenses for monochrome images. Contrast is good, and although it drops off a little if light catches it at the wrong angle, it doesn't happen anything like as readily as it does with the Industar 26. This is a lens you can shoot without a hood, for most of the time at least. With a maximum aperture of f3.5, there's not a great deal of blur on hand, but there is enough to make some striking and beautiful images with a lovely soft feel, particularly if you stay close to your subject. The blur has a very soft quality that never seems to become harsh or nervous, however distances change, and the lens's inherent sharpness, if you nail focus, helps to separate the subject from the background. This is a lovely little lens, small, sharp and beautifully made, a real charmer. It's inexpensive too. You can find a good one of these from around £15 or so, and at that price it's hard to think of a better value lens. So there we are, 3 lovely little lenses. They all make unique images, they're all widely available, and perhaps best of all, they're all cheap. Grab one while you can. So that's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that bell before you go. And if you like the content on this channel and you'd like to help it grow and develop, you can do that at patreon.com/Zenography. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography.